Sometimes the most painful goodbyes are the ones God orchestrates. We don't always lose people because they betrayed us. Sometimes we lose them because heaven is protecting us. You prayed for clarity. You asked God to reveal His will. And now everything feels like it's falling apart. But maybe it's not falling apart. Maybe it's falling into place. Because one of the hardest lessons in faith is learning that not everyone who walks with you is meant to stay with you. Some people are seasonal divine teachers disguised as companions. Others are distractions, sent to delay your destiny. And when God begins to remove them, He often does it quietly, through signs we ignore. 1. Conversations start feeling forced. It's not that the person suddenly turned evil or unworthy. It's that your spirits no longer align. Where there used to be ease, now there's tension. You find yourself over-explaining your faith, your dreams, your peace. There's an invisible distance that words can't fix. You keep trying to revive the friendship, but it feels heavy, like dragging something that's already died. When God is removing someone, He often starts by removing the flow. He'll make conversations dry so that you stop feeding what's no longer fruitful. It's His gentle way of saying, this connection has served its purpose. You see, not every relationship is meant to be lifelong summer classrooms. And when the lesson is learned, the season ends, even if your emotions haven't caught up yet. The danger is in trying to resurrect what God already buried. When communication feels strained and peace feels absent, pay attention. That's not rejection, that's redirection. 2. Their presence starts to disturb your peace. Peace is the language of God's approval. When someone belongs in your life, your spirit rests easily around them. Why? You don't have to pretend. You don't have to walk on eggshells. But when God begins to move someone out of your path, peace evaporates. You leave conversations feeling anxious instead of uplifted. You feel spiritually drained instead of inspired. It's not about perfection, it's about energy. The Holy Spirit will start stirring discomfort when something or someone is misaligned with your purpose. Think of Jonah. He wasn't a bad man, he was just in the wrong place. And when the sailors kept him on board, their ship started to sink. The storm wasn't sent to destroy them, it was sent to correct them. Sometimes the turbulence in your life isn't from the enemy, it's from God saying, you're carrying the wrong passenger. The moment Jonah left the boat, the waters calmed. When peace leaves, pay attention, that absence is guidance. 3. God starts revealing their true character. For a long time, you only saw the good. You defended them, you excused the inconsistencies. You told yourself, everyone has flaws. But then, things start surfacing. They say something that cuts deeper than usual. You catch a glimpse of pride, manipulation, or jealousy, and it shocks you, not because it's new, but because you're finally able to see it. That's not coincidence, that's clarity. God reveals before He removes. When God wants to free you, He'll open your eyes. He'll let the mask slip, not to humiliate them, but to heal you, so that when He tells you to let go, you'll understand why. You see, the enemy hides behind charm, but God exposes through truth, and sometimes, truth hurts before it heals. Don't dismiss those revelations as just a bad moment. When patterns of dishonor appear, they are warnings. God will never remove someone righteous from your life, only someone who hinders your righteousness. When the true nature of a relationship is exposed, don't argue with reality. You prayed for discernment, and this is how God answers. 4. Doors that once opened easily start to close. When God is transitioning you, He will often rearrange circumstances to make separation unavoidable. Conversations that once flowed dry up, opportunities connected to that person dissolve. Schedules conflict, plans keep falling through. You start to feel like you're swimming against a current that used to carry you. That's not coincidence, it's divine interference. God will use inconvenience to protect your destiny. Because sometimes He knows you'd never let go voluntarily, so He makes the connection too uncomfortable to maintain. He'll even create distance through geography, career shifts, or silence. It's not cruelty, it's mercy in disguise. He's creating space for new voices, new growth, and new purpose. Remember Abraham and Lot. Lot wasn't evil, but he wasn't meant to journey into Abraham's next chapter. And the moment they parted ways, God spoke to Abraham again. The voice of direction returned once separation occurred. Some divine instructions only come after you release what's no longer aligned. God's silence might not mean he's distant. It might mean you're crowded. 5. You keep trying to fix what God is trying to finish. You've prayed, fasted, and fought for this connection to survive. You've apologized even when you weren't wrong. You've ignored red flags in the name of grace. But deep down you know, something's off. Why? You're exhausted. Why? Your joy is leaking. You can't even be yourself without walking on emotional glass. That's because you're trying to fix what God has already concluded. He's not asking you to mend it. He's asking you to move on from it. Sometimes God doesn't need your repair. He needs your release. Because as long as you're holding on to who he's trying to remove, you can't receive who he's trying to send. Letting go isn't failure. It's obedience. It's saying, Lord, I trust that you know what's best, even when it hurts. You see, broken relationships aren't always broken by accident. Sometimes they're broken on purpose, by purpose. God uses disconnection to redirect destiny. When you keep patching what keeps breaking, you're delaying your own healing. Time to fix what God already freed you from. 6. You feel spiritually stagnant around them. Before, you used to grow together. You prayed together. You dreamed together. But lately, something feels heavy. Your fire for God starts to dim when you're around them. Your spiritual hunger turns into numbness. And even though nothing bad is happening, you feel less like yourself. That's because your spirit recognizes what your emotions refuse to admit. The connection no longer feeds your calling. When God is removing someone, he often allows stagnation to settle in so that you'll hunger for movement again. He'll let your spirit get restless so you'll crave fresh alignment. It's like a tree that outgrows its pot. The roots need more room. And sometimes, you have to be replanted away from certain soil to bear new fruit. Don't mistake comfort for connection. If you have to shrink your faith to keep the peace, it's not peace, it's compromise. When your spiritual growth stops around certain people, God is signaling that it's time to reposition. And yes, that might mean stepping into loneliness for a while, but loneliness in God's will is safer than companionship outside of it. 7. God gives you a deep, unshakable knowing. When all the signs align and your heart still resists, God speaks through conviction. You'll feel a deep, unexplainable stirring inside, a gentle but firm whisper saying, "It's time." It won't come through chaos or fear, it'll come through clarity and peace. You'll notice that every time you pray, you sense the same answer. Every time you ask for confirmation, the same message echoes back. And no matter how hard you try to silence it, the truth remains. God is asking you to let them go. This is where many believers struggle, because we equate love with attachment. But God equates love with alignment. He's not asking you to stop caring. He's asking you to stop clinging, because what's ahead requires both your hands free. You can't carry new blessings if your arms are full of old battles. And when you finally obey, when you release what no longer belongs, something miraculous happens. Pace returns, joy resurfaces, clarity floods back in. You start to feel lighter, freer, and strangely thankful. Even for the heartbreak, because now you see what you couldn't before. God never removes without reason. He prunes so you can bloom. A deeper look at God's protection. Think back over your life. Every person who left unexpectedly, every friendship that faded, every relationship that ended painfully. Didn't you eventually see the protection hidden inside the loss? At the time you thought God was being cruel. Every person who left, as you can look back and say, if they had stayed, I might have missed my purpose. That's the pattern of divine love. He protects you from what you won't walk away from. He interrupts your plans to preserve your calling. He breaks temporary connections to build eternal ones. You're not unlucky, you're being refined. You're not abandoned, you're being aligned. You're not rejected, you're being redirected. God's subtractions are always sacred, even when they sting. When it hurts to let go. Let's be honest, obedience doesn't always feel holy. Sometimes it feels like heartbreak. You'll cry. You'll question yourself. You'll wonder if you overreacted. But remember, even Jesus experienced separation. He loved Judas, but he still released him. Because not everyone who walks with you can carry your cross. Some people are meant to start the journey with you, not finish it beside you, and that's okay. Healing begins when you stop asking, "Why did they leave?" and start thanking God that He revealed what you couldn't see, because one day, you'll look back and realize the distance was deliverance. How to let go God's way. Acknowledge the ending without resentment. It's not always about blame. Sometimes it's about completion to pray. Lord, I release them in peace. I bless them as they go. Grieve honestly but briefly. God understands your sadness, but don't dwell in sorrow longer than necessary. Let tears cleanse, not chain you. Fill the empty space with God's presence. When He removes someone, it's not to leave you lonely, it's to lead you into deeper intimacy with Him. Use that time to rebuild your identity around His love, not someone's approval. Resist the urge to return out of nostalgia. The past will always feel familiar, but familiarity isn't faith. Don't reopen doors that God locked for your protection. Expect new divine connections. God never subtracts without multiplying later. Trust that He's preparing relationships that match your maturity, your mission, and your healing. The beauty beyond separation. One of the greatest signs of spiritual growth is when you stop chasing who left and start cherishing who's left. God, when He removes someone, He's not punishing you, He's pruning you, and pruning is proof that you're bearing fruit. Every goodbye carves space for great. Every ending is an echo of new beginnings. You may not see it now, but months or years from today, you'll realize that closed door saved your destiny. That silence spared your spirit. That heartbreak set you free. Final reflection. So if you feel God tugging on your heart to let go, listen. He's not trying to take something from you. He's trying to give something to you. You can't walk into a new season carrying old attachments. You can't step into peace while holding on to what drains you. Trust that His no is protecting your yes. Trust that His separation is setting you up for elevation. And trust that His removal is not rejection. It's realignment. Because God never removes without replacing. He never subtracts without sanctifying. He never ends a chapter without writing a better one. If you're in a season of release, remember this. It's not a loss, it's liberation. It's not the end, it's the editing. And the author of your life knows exactly what He's doing. So breathe, let go, and let God. Because the hands that break you are the same hands that bless you. And when He removes, He's really making room for something higher and far more heavenly than what you were holding on to. If this message spoke to your heart, take a moment to subscribe to Secret Prayer Closet. Here, we share messages that strengthen your faith, restore your peace, and remind you that God never wastes pain. And if you know someone who's going through a season of pruning or release, share this video with them. You never know how much one word from God could change their entire perspective. Join our growing family of believers, learning to trust God through every season, the breaking, the healing, and the becoming. Hit subscribe, tap the notification bell, and let's keep walking together in faith and purpose. Because your story isn't over, God is still writing.